Welcome back to the ongoing conversation about international missions at Fellowship Bible Church, where you get a front row seat to hear what God is continually doing to establish His church around the world. And this is our first podcast of 2025. We're very excited to be back. And on the podcast today, we have Scott McManigle and Jim Poole here to talk about where God is leading global missions in 2025. So welcome back, guys.
Thank you.
Scott, it's good to see you up and moving around and doing a lot better. The end of the year, I think, was a little bit rough for you.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. My knee's coming along, so getting stronger every day.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great. And then Jim, you've already hit the road. That'll be a future podcast. So
sure. Yeah.
Started the year running. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, we took a trip to Uganda. Unfortunately, Scott wasn't able to make it due to your leg, and we missed you, and people that we were with, they missed him as well.
Yeah,
but we had a good trip there, and I'll save that for another podcast.
Yep, that'll be coming out soon. So, well, let's just dive right into it. So, where do you guys see God leading global missions in 2025? And I'll come your way first, Scott.
Yeah, so everything we do is long term. There's a process to it all, because our focus is the church. Right. Our focus is establishing churches. And so, we're beginning with pastors and church leaders that, I would say are generally very confused in the faith. Mm-hmm. They have a transactional view of God, they're living the Christian life and viewing the Christian life more as a religion than a relationship, and so then God's transactional. If I do these things, then God blesses me. If I'm faithful with this, and God does this, and that's that's their view of the Christian life. That's their view of God. And so, in order for them, they've been the ones that have been called and raised up to establish their churches and shepherd their flocks. Well, they have to be able to shepherd their churches, lead their churches, disciple their churches into this new view of who God really is, what God's really like, what the Christian life is really about, and how it's based in grace and the finished work of Christ, not the faithfulness and obedience of man. As far as man's concerned, it's more centered in our sinfulness and disobedience than our obedience and faithfulness, because it's about grace and the finished work of Christ. And so that's a long process. And so we begin, we have what we call a chronological or a foundational approach to unfolding the Word of God. And we feel like it's very important to begin at the beginning and begin to foundationally and progressively first lead them into this different view of God and what God's like, and then into, which begins with the meta-narrative context, which we've talked about many times in many podcasts, that, really reveals this foreordained plan of God before the foundations of the earth, and that it was always about grace, always centered in Christ. And then you follow the Word of God through the Old Testament, and you can see, it's always been about grace. He's always pointing man to Jesus' coming and fulfillment of the eternal plan. And so what we're going to be doing in 2025 is, continuing on with those processes, with the works that we're involved with. A lot of the ones that we've been working with for many, many years, the pastors and the church leaders, the key leaders we've been working with, are very grounded in these truths. They have been establishing others in these truths for a long time, and many of them we won't even visit in 2025 just because they're already that far down the road, and they're at what we would call more of a peer status than needing us to come and continue to teach and disciple them. But then all the new countries that we went to in 2024 in Africa, we're very much at the beginning stages with the field coordinators and the key leaders of those fields. And so we're going to have a couple conferences, one in April in Nigeria, and then one in July in Kenya, where we're getting those field coordinators and pastors together to continue the process of establishing them in these truths so that they can turn around and establish the other missionaries, establish other pastors, their churches, and begin moving down that road on their fields.
Okay. That's great. So that's definitely a continuation of what you guys really started in 2024 and partnering with Simon and Joshua, Equa, EMS, and really doing the Africa tour, as you guys called it. So continuing on that, continuing to build those relationships. Gotcha.
And then some of them we'll also be bringing to we'll have our Global Church Focus Week this year in October. And we're inviting some of them to come to that as well. Yeah. So we're going to have 3 different times of interaction with some of those field coordinators. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Global Church Week. So, Jim, do you kind of want to talk about that? Like, what is the point? Why do we do Global Church Week? I know it's one of my favorite weeks every time we do it here at the church, and I know it's a lot of people's favorites. So can you talk about how important that particular week in October is for FBC?
Yeah, Global Church Week is an opportunity where we bring a lot of our global family here to our church every other year. And like Scott and I, and yourself, you've taken trips with us and other folks from our church. They can get the opportunity to take trips with us, but our large body as a whole don't get the opportunity like we do to spend time with our global family. So we bring anywhere from 35 to 45 folks of our global family here, so that our church at large can spend time with our global family. Because like we said a number of times, that if it wasn't for this church and the giving of this church that is so sacrificial and gracious, we wouldn't be able to do anything that we do with missions.
That's right.
And so it's a chance for our body to just be able to spend some time with these folks from Africa, different countries from Africa, different countries from Asia, and different countries from Latin America. Yeah. And so that's really the big purpose is for our church, for people in our body to be able to get to know more of our global family, hear stories of what God's doing around the world with our global family, hear more of how we can specifically pray for families and people and works of what God is doing around the world with our family. And then also for different people of our global family to spend time with each other. And there's been a lot of overlap in Africa this past year, but it's a really special time for our global family to spend time with each other. And so sometimes this is every other year is the only opportunity that they get to see each other. And it's encouraging because, like you said, some folks we've been involved with for a long time, even decades. Some folks it's new. And so there's that relationship. And one thing is the continuity with all the relationships and all the works where we're involved in. And, what brings us all together is Christ and the centrality of Christ, and this just the message that we all just rejoice in the finished work of Christ. We rejoice in His grace, and there's just that like-mindedness. It's just that we're on the same page, and so just to be able to, for them, as national pastors, as local church leaders in their area, for them to be able to come together is really enjoyable for them as well, for our body to be able to spend time with them. Yeah.
Every conference we have, like no matter where what country it is or who it is we have together, it's always with pastors, always with these church leaders, and at the end, there's always the sending off and the saying goodbye and the giving of thanks, and at every conference at the end they always ask us to thank Fellowship Bible Church for making this possible. And so, like, one of our real desires, main takeaways for our own body and having Global Church Week is that we really want the body to have a sense of, that this is their work. Yeah. This isn't just Scott and Jim's work,
Right.
or the missions committee's work. This is Fellowship Bible Church as a body's work, because if it wasn't for the body, like Jim said, there would be no global missions. There would be none of these conferences. There would be no establishing, these churches in the faith. And I don't know. The number of people whose faith has been established through the years, it's in the thousands for sure. Yeah. It's got to be in the tens of thousands, because of this church, because of this body. And like, I think in a lot of people's mindsets that, well, if they want to be involved in global missions, they've got to be supporting a parachurch organization. They got to be supporting expat missionaries that are with another organization. But no, here at FBC, this whole body is vitally involved in what God is doing in global missions around the world just by being a part of this church.
Right.
And so we just we really want people to come away with that takeaway that they really have a sense for what they're involved in.
Yeah. Even if they're not traveling, man, God is using them as a part of this body, participating in this work, which is so very incredible. So, Global Missions Week, that'll be super exciting coming up in October. More information will be coming out when we get closer. But another way that some members of the body get to be involved is family camp. And that is another continuation, something that has been done for the past couple of years. So, Jim, do you kind of want to share a little bit about what family camp is, what it's going to look like this year and stuff?
Yeah, so family camp will be in June of this year, and it's in Medora, North Dakota. And this is our third year of doing family camp, and it is where Native American churches bring folks from their churches, kids 10 years old, 7 years old, all the way up to adults, 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds. And so they come as some are individuals, but there's also families. And so these churches, they come and they bring folks from their churches. And we're able to engage kids, we're able to engage teenagers, we're able to spend time with the adults and the whole, everybody that comes. Number one, sharing the love of Christ with them in terms of just showing them love, showing Christ to them. We spend time doing some, formal study with them. Then we spend time doing some activities, doing some crafts, doing some fun things, just to build relationships and to build rapport with these churches that we're getting to know more and more and more. And it's last year, like I said, this will be our third year. The second year, there was more people that came than the first year. And we're thinking that the third year, this coming year, we're expecting Chris Little, who is the point person for the whole thing. He said there's some potential churches coming from Montana. So we're expecting some additional folks to be coming from those churches. So even some more folks coming that weren't there the first 2 years. And so, we're just excited about the opportunity to spend time with them. And I think this year, what we're talking about doing is Scott's in the process, or almost done, of rewriting the Creation of Christ lessons. And so this year, we're going to be going through the Creation of Christ lessons with the adults, because that is a great tool that they can take back and study through the Word of God, look up the Bible verses and go through those lessons, either with a coworker or a family member or a neighbor or something like that. It's an easy on-ramp type thing for them to begin to study with a friend, a relative, neighbor, coworker. And we all know that as we go through something with somebody, that we're learning a ton ourselves. So our goal this summer is going to be to expose them to that tool and go through that with them this summer, helping to equip them to go back to wherever they live on the reservation or whatever town it is, to be able to take others through that material as well. And then there's the benefit of our church, folks that from FBC that can go. It's a cross-cultural missions experience. You've been yourself, and so it's an opportunity where people can go, families can go. You can fly if you want, you can drive if you want, but it's not halfway around the world. You don't need a visa to get there. It's a much easier trip for people to make to begin to get into cross-cultural missions here in our own country. With Native Americans, which, as we've shared in the past, there is just a tremendous need. Native Americans across our country, right here in our own backyard. So, looking to the Lord how to minister to our guests there, but also it's a great opportunity for our church to be involved in teaching and discipleship and missions cross-culturally here in the States.
No, that's true. That's such a great opportunity. I want to highlight something you said. You mentioned that, Scott, you're in the process of rewriting Creation to Christ. And so can you talk a little bit about the curriculums that Global Missions has? And then you're obviously rewriting Creation to Christ. Are you working through other curriculums and updating them? What's that going to look like for you guys this year?
Yeah, we are. It's an ongoing process. As like Jim said, as you teach, you continue to grow, and the more you grow, I think the more effective you become at communicating truth. And so, I see that happen in our own lives. And so, when I go back and I go through some of those, early Creation to Christ lessons, there's a lot I would like to change. And just reword, and one of them, one of the main things that, I think God just gave me vision for was to actually write it into the context of the meta-narrative. And so that's kind of the main thing that I'm doing is beginning with the meta-narrative context, but then as we go through the lessons through the Old Testament, showing how, keeping the context in view, as we're going through. And then just, changing some focuses and some tweaks. There's a lot more of man focused and God focused in some of it, that I'm wanting to change. But yeah, like Jim said, the purpose is to, it's a very simplified version of knowing God. It's less lessons. And it's just not going to the depth that the knowing God lessons go to. And then we're also, so our whole curriculum, it begins with that foundational teaching of creation to Christ. And then, we begin to go through Acts and then the epistles for what we always called in the past growing believers or new believers. And so that first time through is more of an overview of books and, establishing, the main principles of grace in the finished work of Christ, but often in various books skipping chapters and skipping, portions of chapters. And then there's a second time going through, which knowing God then would be the beginning of, and then the new man in Christ, and then the epistles, which is more of a, covering every chapter, covering every verse. And so we're in the process of revising those too, because, just through the years of just teaching through this stuff, I think our understanding becomes clearer and we become more effective, in communicating those things. And so it's definitely time for an update and something that we definitely want to do. And it's it's to transform, the purpose of it all is to transform people's view of God, of the Christian life, in the finished work of Christ. And like with back to family camp, these the people that come to family camp, I don't know how else to say it, but it just are coming from such a mess, a train wreck in their families, a train wreck on the reservations, a train wreck in many of their churches, like they have no hope economically. They have no hope, educationally, and they have no hope. The church isn't giving them hope either. When the church is proclaiming a works-based, distorted gospel, people that are living in addiction and abusive situations, like that kind of view of Christianity and God doesn't give you any hope. No. And so, like we say, we can't change their, in 1 week a year, we can't change their family. We can't change the reservation. We can't take away their addictions, but we can change their view of God.
Yeah.
And that's what we're after. And so, and that's, I think that's the focus and the purpose of our lessons, and what we're trying to be, more effective at in communicating. And so,
helping people see more clearly who God is and not who we think that he is. So what my next question is there anything new that God is leading you guys towards in 2025 for global missions? We talked about a lot of continuations of things, but what about new? Is there anything new?
I think the lesson revision is something that's new. Like I'm almost done with Acts. Just revising Acts, and like Scott said, in terms of creation in Christ, it's the same thing with Acts. And so it's been real enjoyable to go through Acts to see, there's the 4 stages of the meta-narrative. There's a planning stage, there's the preparation stage, there's the fulfillment stage, and then the result of the fulfilled stage. And so, like Scott was saying, putting the creation of Christ in the context of the meta-narrative, to see the book of Acts in the context of it's the immediate work of the result of the fulfilled stage. So, like Christ ascends to heaven, he says, wait. He ascends to heaven and wait. And like that is a first action of the fulfilled result of the fulfilled plan. Like that's it.
Wait for the Spirit's indwelling.
And so that's it. And so, like we talked about the result of the fulfilled plan and things like that, but like, so to see the book of Acts, like it's the first laying out of the results of the fulfilled plan, so to see the book from that perspective. And so I'm excited about it. There's lesson rewriting and revision going on, and then the lessons are going to get out and be translated where they need to be translated. They don't need to be translated everywhere, but where they need to be translated. So I think that's going to be new. Think about new, new stuff, and maybe change that. Lesson content. That's one thing that comes to mind for me.
In terms of new, new places. The Native American ministry, expansion it's going to be. It's exciting to me. Chris Little, God is just really doing a work, in and through him, and just he's just such a key part of all. He has so many contacts, and he's just gotten super excited, about grace and about, who God really is and what God's really like, and he's been teaching it in his church, and he has connection with pastors in Oklahoma, and he's the one that is bringing in these pastors from Montana, and and their whole desire to be a part of it was at a Dakota Baptist convention that Chris was at and had the opportunity to share at. He shared, it sounded like it was just a short time, but shared just what, growing in grace and what he's been receiving, the impact that it's had in his life and has had in his church. And he said when he was done, it was these pastors from Montana that kind of came rushing up asking him, how can we get this grace teaching? And so, so it's, I'm really excited to meet these guys and just to, just see where it goes, see what God does. And
that's so exciting.
It is.
That's awesome.
One more thing, not a huge thing, but being that you're asked the question, I was thinking about it. In May, we're going to go to Pakistan,
Okay.
and this will be our third year in a row going there to Pakistan. And we gave an overview of knowing God. We did the new man lessons, and this time we're going to do Romans.
Okay.
And we're bringing the wives this time.
Oh, nice.
So that'll be fun.
Yeah.
You know, the first 2 times we just brought the men, brought the husbands. So it'll be new, you know, bringing the wives. This time I think it'll be really beneficial. You know, husband and wife, they are a ministering team. They are a ministering couple. And so for us to have 3 days with them together and for them to be hearing the teaching together, I think will be beneficial or encouraging and something new this year for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. And so you guys have referenced some trips. You already went to Uganda. You've referenced Kenya, Nigeria, Pakistan. What is travel going to look like for you guys in 2025? I know you said you're not going to maybe visit the people who are more established, but there's still a lot of new relationships being built. So
Yeah, it's not going to be as much as last year,
Okay.
And partly because we're having our Global Church Focus Week in October, and so we'll be bringing, you know, a lot of people together. You know, we were really feeling the need to make a trip to Kenya to meet with the POCOT. And before going to Uganda, we got the idea, well, you know what, I think where we're going to be meeting in these Ugandan conferences is really close to where the POCOT guys are. We could probably just have them meet us there, and we could meet with them in the evenings and so that's what we did, and they came, and Jim was able to meet with James and Zacchaeus in the evenings at the second conference, which was closer to the Kenyan border.
Okay.
So that cuts out a trip that needs to be made. When we make the trip to Kenya in July, we're actually going to go, I think, a few days early and get James and Zacchaeus and some of their key leaders together in Nairobi, and to have a time with them while we're there. Just to try and maximize, you know, our time there. So that'll cut out another, you know, trip. So yeah, the main thing we're doing is just trying to keep the momentum going with these field coordinators and pastors that we began a relationship with last year, and so we'll get together with them in April in Nigeria, and then there's a whole new group of regional coordinators in Nigeria that hadn't been a part of what we've already been doing there, that they're wanting us to begin this process with. So we'll be meeting with a group of regional Nigerian, they call them regional field coordinators in Nigeria. It's just a giant field. I mean, you know, Nigeria, they just have so many missionaries and so many pastors and churches and just
And that's a
all
new
over.
group.
Yeah,
So it's
totally
exciting
new.
because
so
you know
exciting.
God keeps raising up new groups.
Yeah.
Like 84 men they were talking about. Yeah.
Wow.
And just at work in Nigeria alone. And so, and then, so then we'll be meeting with the field coordinators from the African countries that we met with last year in Nigeria and went around to all their fields. We'll be inviting them all to come to Kenya. So we'll meet with them there and continue on with that with them. We're going to go through Ephesians with them. And then Pakistan, then the Native American Family Camp in June, Kenya in July. Then we're just 2-3 months out from the Global Church Week, so we're probably won't have any travel between July and Global Church Week. So
You're going to go visit a guy you've been meeting with, the native guy, Miles, next week.
Yes.
To keep that relationship going.
Yep.
What is it in?
Yeah, another young guy that he's from the Meskwaki tribe in Iowa, and he's just back in his home area, just trying to reach his own people. He's come to our family camp 2 years in a row, and so Annette and I are going to go out there, and we invited Braden Oplak to go along.
Nice.
And hopes that Braden and this guy's named Miles, Braden and Miles would be able to head up the teaching of the teen boys at family camp this summer. So
yeah, that'll be awesome.
Yeah.
That's so very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. It's nice to get back in and start podcasting again.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Really, really excited for what God is going to do with Global Missions in 2025. My last question before we wrap up, what are ways that the body can be praying for Global Missions? What are specific prayer requests? I know we've referenced trips, we've referenced people, new relationships, continuing relationships, but is there anything that comes to mind that you guys would say this would be really incredible to pray for this year?
For me, it is that hungry hearts.
Okay.
We go places and we share, and that, we know the Spirit of God is working to bring things to our remembrance and to lead us and guide us into all truth. And just that people would be at a spot where they're ready to receive it. And I think the three of us can understand, even probably so many of our listeners, we can understand when you're sharing something that somebody's ready to receive it or not.
Right.
And I'm sure we share something and we leave, and it might not be for a week or a month or 6 months or even a couple of years. Maybe God sparks something that, hey, I remember something from that conference, but just that God would be working. I mean, we know God is working.
Right.
So the prayer isn't that God would be working, but that people would be seeing their need for God, seeing God's love for them, and then seeing their need for God, and just open to His work in their lives. That would be, it's a spiritual ministry that God has us involved in, and they would see their spiritual need for Christ in their lives.
Yeah, for me, along those lines, it's always in regards to the content, and the establishment of people in the faith. And, as a cross-cultural church planting missionary, there was a lot of technical aspects that were a part of our ministry in Thailand, learning the language, learning the culture, how to put together a literacy program, and translation, and learning an unwritten language, and all that kind of stuff. And you can have all those things in place. You can really know the language and really know the culture and have great rapport with the people and know how to do all these things, and then turn around, and when you begin teaching, put the church under the law, or bring a distorted gospel, or teach them to depend upon their own works and effort and not the finished work of Christ. And so when it comes to church planting and establishing churches, for me, above all things, the structure, the programs, it's the content. Yeah. You can have all those things in place, and if you have the wrong content, your church will not be established. Your people will not become established in the faith. And so for us, it's, first and foremost, it's that, that all the effort that we're putting into the trips and the teaching and the equipping and the revising of the lessons and the passing them on, and then their translation of the lessons, and then their reteaching of the lessons, that, that all this would just truly result in people being moved from trusting, hoping, and depending upon themselves to resting solely in the finished work of Christ. And so I think that's the main thing that we're after, and I would appreciate prayer for.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important. So thank you all so much for being a part of today's episode. If you want to learn more about our Global Church partners, make sure you check out the mission stairwell right next to the north main entrance. So each month, the Grace Ministry of Global Missions highlights different Global Church partners. And this month, we are highlighting some of our specific partners in Asia. And in the stairwell, you can find info sheets about them and their specific ministry. These partners serve in a country that is not friendly to the gospel, so we don't want to share their information online. So to best find out how to connect and pray for them, you can do that by visiting the stairwell at the north main entrance. And for all of our listeners and viewers, remember that we always love to hear from you. So you can send us your thoughts, questions, requests at fbcva.org/podcast and write us your notes and comments. Thanks so much for watching and listening. And remember that it is Christ who is continually building His church until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God.
Ready